Today we will be discussing access to digital media literacy, addressing the participation gap and the digital divide. What does access mean in terms of the participation gap and the digital divide? In his 2011 report, Henry Jenkins describes what he calls participatory culture. He defines it as a culture brought together by digital media and characterized by the following features. He contends that access to participatory culture teaches essential cultural competencies and social skills. In his report, he highlights the challenges to the participatory culture, one of which he calls the participation gap. He defines the participation gap as the unequal access to the opportunities, experiences, skills, and knowledge that will prepare youth for full participation in the world of tomorrow. In his report, Jenkins uses another term that is commonly used when talking about digital media literacy, the digital divide. Whereas it was historically used to describe who had physical access to technology and who did not, its definition has expanded to describe any uneven distribution in the use of or impact of information and communication technologies between any number of groups defined by social, geographical, or geopolitical criteria or otherwise. Whether you're talking about the participation gap or the digital divide, at the heart of both of them is access. What do we mean by access? When we talk about access, we're talking about not only physical access to software and hardware, but also about useful proximity to technology. For example, full access might mean having a computer and internet at home and not just in one's school, library, or other community space. It is also about having consistent access to high-speed internet in those spaces. It's about having access to quality digital media literacy education, whether you live in an urban center or in a rural or remote area. It means having the opportunity to learn digital literacy skills very affordably or for free. It means having ease of entry to digital literacy education, regardless of your age or skill level. Access refers to having mentors with whom students can identify. It refers to receiving a quality education, which is made possible by giving educators the ongoing resources to provide digital literacy education that will evolve as technology and the ways in which we use technology evolves. Who is responsible for providing access to digital media literacy? While the formal education system, such as schools and universities, play an important role in providing access to digital literacy education to all Canadians, they work alongside and sometimes in partnership with public, nonprofit, grassroots, and private organizations to form an informal system of digital literacy education. All of these organizations play a role in closing the participation gap and the digital divide that undeniably exist locally and across Canada.
What does the participation gap digital divide look like in Ontario, Toronto? An annual report conducted by the People for Education based on the results from an annual Ontario school survey looked at the use of technology in today's schools, including bring your own device policies, e-learning, access to technology, and the role of school libraries. For many students within the Greater Toronto Area, learning sometimes stops within the classroom simply because of their inability to get online at home. With no access to computers or adequate broadband speeds, many students have the unfortunate trouble of truly excelling and attaining the additional research needed for their studies. The Toronto District School Board has no policy on the ratio of students to computers. In some cases, the student-to-computer ratio at a school was 1:1. In other cases, it was 8:1. Despite the ever-increasing presence of technology in our world, access remains a big challenge and varies from school to school. There are disparity in technology literacy and drastic difference between groups that have access to technology and those that don't across Toronto. Students from high-rise at the Jane and Finch neighborhood in Toronto got through a third of the curriculum that they would with kids coming to a downtown coding class. The digital divide stems from income inequality among Canadians and differences in online practices that are displayed by those of different ages, gender, language, and cultural backgrounds, which contribute to the divide itself. What are the challenges to providing access to digital technology to all students? Economic challenges would be that not all students have access to devices in school or at home, especially those in low socioeconomic areas. Geographical challenges with lack of internet access in rural schools illustrate the significant inequitable disparities across rural and urban school communities. According to school principals, lack of funding, poor connectivity, and insufficient access to professional development can make it challenging to successfully integrate technology in schools. At the moment, both formal education systems and after-school programming are responding to the need for digital literacy training. However, formal curricula can be slow to change, and the necessary resources are often out of reach for schools. Community-based programs such as after-school spaces can easily adapt to the continuously changing digital landscape, but often experience capacity issues such as limited technology or expertise that interferes with access to programming.
How can schools address the fundamental inequalities in students' access to new media technologies? One of the ways in which schools can address the fundamental inequalities in students' access to new media technologies is through school fundraising. School fundraising has the potential for technology to be purchased for access for all students. In a survey conducted by the People for Education, principals reported that technology is often purchased through school fundraising. However, it has also been reported that there are still challenges that come with relying on fundraising to purchase and maintain technology, and that it is far more difficult to raise these funds in low-income neighborhoods. To illustrate the wide disparities across Ontario schools using data from Statistics Canada, in 2019, 85% of elementary schools in high-income neighborhoods fundraised for technology, compared to the 54% of elementary schools in low-income neighborhoods. How can educators ensure that all students benefit from learning in ways that allow them to participate through the use of media technologies? The existing technology that is purchased in schools, such as laptops, tablets, and other devices that students use in class, can also be offered for students to borrow to use at home. One example of this comes from the Upper Grand District School Board, where the school board purchased Chromebooks to be shared among students via local public libraries. This initiative helped bridge the digital divide for students who needed computer access for other schoolwork but did not have a computer in their own home. Despite these efforts, some schools may still struggle to purchase enough technology to meet the needs of all students and ensure equitable access. Teachers, school boards, the public sector, the private sector, and the government at all levels are each making efforts towards closing the participation gap and the digital divide. There remains, however, disparities in access. Though each of these stakeholders are making strides towards providing access to quality digital media literacy education, no single stakeholder can close the participation gap and the digital divide on its own. All of the stakeholders must work together in a deliberate and sustainable way to establish Canada-wide funding, policies, and standards that effectively eliminate the barriers to access to digital media literacy. Every student deserves equitable access to technology and digital media literacy because it will prepare them for the new media landscape, but also full social, economic, and civic participation.